Hello, and welcome to this video edition of Don't Miss This. I'm your host, Jennifer Garrity. Today we're going to visit the Loading Urban Art in the Digital Age exhibit, currently at the Grand Palais Immersif. At the start of the exhibit, we are told that we will be tracing the history of street art and experiencing how digital technology has transformed the art form. The street artists featured in this exhibit should be seen as hackers or whistleblowers. For them, all that matters is getting their message across. For these artists, the location of the pieces is integral to their message, and so we begin in a large dark room with 360-degree immersive film projections, where we can see the pieces in situ, just as they were meant to be seen. I loved this. These projections last 25 minutes, have a phenomenal soundtrack, and are a real joy to watch. We begin, of course, in the 1960s in New York City. The 1960s were a time of great social unrest and political upheaval. A group of children in the Bronx created a game where they would write their names as often and over as much of the city as they could, and thus, tagging was born. The police immediately cracked down on this, calling it vandalism, which just encouraged more tagging. The media picked up on this, calling it graffiti, and a new form of social rebellion was born. Subway cars were the first major targets because the train yards were easy to break into. Although this began before my time, seeing all these tagged subway cars reminded me so much of my childhood, which I'm sure adds to why I loved this exhibit so much. This tagging grew in popularity throughout the 1970s and 1980s. In the 1980s, artists like Keith Haring took over digital billboards in Times Square. By the 2000s, street art had spread all over the world, and popularity of stencils meant that larger-scale pieces could be added to the urban, and not-so-urban landscapes. In the 2010s, street art festivals began popping up all over the world, and a respect for the art form grew. The 2020s, lest we forget, brought with them COVID, which had the unexpected effect of reinvigorating graffitiists, many of whom burned with political rage and messaging. Here in Paris, you'll find activists like One Up, which stands for One United Power, whose illegal actions support ecological engagement, and Essilop, who paints upside-down police cars in protest of the police. The accessibility of drone technology has meant that street art can be viewed and filmed in a whole new light. As we move into the future, there is no limit to what and where street artists can create. With this film as our baseline, we venture forth into the rest of the exhibit. Have you ever wondered who the first tagger was? Well, it may well have been Joseph Kiselak, who was a civil servant during the Austrian Empire. In 1825, he traveled from Austria to Slovenia, Italy, and Bavaria, painting and carving his name on hundreds of buildings and hills along the way. Legend has it that he was reprimanded by Emperor Franz I after discovering that Kiselak had tagged his desk. In 1959, Fernando Oresti Nanetti was committed to a psychiatric hospital in Volterra, Italy, for schizophrenia. He covered his walls with drawings etched with his belt buckle. Although he lacked any formal artistic training, this spontaneous art form has been called a stone book. And now, of course, graffiti isn't limited to the real world, but with games like Street Fighter and Grand Theft Auto, it has made its way into the metaverse. It, quote, freezes the experience of the forbidden in time and documents the evolution of a written art form at a time when our society is forsaking handwriting for computer keyboards. End quote. From here, we move from graffiti to Giffiti. I'm sorry, I didn't write that. That's the actual name of this section. By the way, there are lots of ways to get involved in this exhibit if you're so inclined. You can create your own GIF, your own mural, and your own tag. Nowadays, artists like Bianco Shock transform social media logos to highlight the difference between the digital world and the real one. We'll end with one of my favorite French street artists, Kashink, as she creates her piece Fluid. Loading, l'art urbain à l'ère numérique will be at the Grand Palais Immersif on July 21st, 2024.